All right, it's interesting to me that we have this continued um, desire to lower the cholesterol of every human being on the planet. We see that as opposed to looking at a more nuanced step, there are people, particularly in the cardiology profession, that are just they are just determined, and it's not only just certain people at risk, but it's every human on the planet at a younger and younger and younger age. They are convinced that we are all suffering from some sort of drug deficiency, and that is the problem that we have as human beings, and that it couldn't possibly be that some of these things are normal physiology and we have to intervene. It's kind of like people that have gastric bypasses. How dare you actually have a full stomach? That's craziness. That's got to be the problem, the fact that you have a stomach. That's why you're so obese. Of course, that's not the answer. But it's interesting, there's some studies out there looking at, there's these new drugs, PCSK9 inhibitors, which are quote unquote super statins. These drugs can bring your LDL cholesterol down to 20, where as low as possible. Evolocumab and alirocumab are the two that are on the market, also known as Repatha and Praluent. And these medications have been looked at, and it's kind of interesting when you look at some of the studies on these. And so there was a study looking at the efficacy of these two medications and looked at a number of trials, which they looked at all the results, and they definitely were good at lowering cholesterol. There was no doubt about it. They could lower cholesterol very, very low. Unfortunately, the outcomes don't really indicate that they provide much of a cardiovascular benefit as far as preventing significant events. Now, there are some outliers that show that, but I mean, for the most part, kind of meh. And then there was, this other study, that one study I showed you was in 2016. There's another study from 2020, kind of looking at the same thing, looking at adverse events. And what they saw, interestingly, was that these drugs don't really do much, and that the Repatha drug actually potentially caused more harm than it did good. And so why is it that dramatically lowering cholesterol potentially, doesn't provide much of a benefit and maybe even causes harm? It's kind of interesting questions. Now, again, I am, someone who is sort of, I think you should listen to what your patients desire and, their overall well-being. And I think that when you only follow algorithms, which are often basically written by pharmaceutical companies, they write the algorithms which the sort of medical governing bodies, the American Heart Association, and so on and so forth, sort of distributes to the doctors, and then they go through and follow these algorithms kind of almost mindlessly in some cases, which is kind of a shame. We have people that are saying, well, this is a science, but then when you realize that, particularly around these drug trials, the raw data from these trials is often not available, not even available to the peer reviewers that actually are in charge of reviewing the data. So the drug company basically makes their conclusions. They show the conclusions to the reviewers, and the reviewers, basically, look at it and say, okay, it makes sense or not, but they don't get access to the actual data. The data is protected as quote unquote proprietary corporate data. So it could be, who knows what they're not showing, and so it's kind of a bit concerning. So anyway, I think this is a topic that, in my view, this sort of myopic focus on lowering cholesterol in all cases at all costs has probably harmed more people than it's helped. And I know that's a bold statement, but I think when we look at the overall impact of dietary recommendations and some of the results of our healthcare outcomes, they're not very good. In fact, they've gotten worse and worse as time has gone by. And part of it has to do with the fact that our population continues to get sicker and sicker and sicker. We do have more people living with chronic disease. I would argue they're not really living. They're basically just waiting to die, more or less. Again, this is a paradigm shift that we are trying to do, that I am trying to do, that our company is trying to do, and there's other companies along the line that are doing the same thing. People are getting it. People are waking up. People are tired of the same old, here's a pill for this, you must be on a pill. Obviously, well, you've got this medical problem, therefore you must have a drug deficiency of some sort. Doesn't make sense. Anyway, you guys stay strong. We'll talk to you soon.